Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tabletop Voices. I am James Introcaso, your host. I go by he, him. I am very excited for today because I have a super special guest with me. TK Johnson is an amazing writer, an actual player, and a game master. Welcome to the show, TK. For people who don't know, who are you and what have you done in the world of tabletop role-playing games?
Let's see. I had a response for this, but now that I'm on camera, I'm like, oh. Okay. So right now I'm in 4 games a week, which is gonna be brought down to 3 because the Hell's Bells finale is done. I just finished writing a comic with Kayla Klein. It's a Strix comic, so it's dice camera action themed, and it's set in Barovia. And then I do have a couple of editing credits on some DM's Guild stuff that's coming out very soon. But other than that, outside of D&D, I write gothic horror and dark fantasy, and I write spooky stories, basically. Last spooky stories.
Yes, and I think spooky is putting it mildly. Your stories can be soul-crushing in a beautiful way at times, and so it's super awesome to have you here. I want to get into your writing and your actual playing and your editing and all that kind of stuff, but first, take me all the way back. When did you first lay hands on a tabletop role-playing game?
Oh boy. It was okay. So I was a small child. My parents both played a lot of role-playing games. So I learned to read with second edition. Legends and Lore and Demigods and Deities. And the Fiend Folio.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So these were books that your parents have. Did your parents teach you how to play?
Yes. When I got older, and could actually understand, but we didn't play with much more than a D20 because we had to make up the damage and stuff. It was very narrative style because at the time the mechanics weren't super kid friendly, I guess is the way to say it. Not too many 6-year-olds can grasp Thaco, so it's kind of like, wow, this is a lot of math for no reason.
Yeah, not too many 30-year-olds can grasp Thaco, so I totally understand as someone who doesn't grasp Thaco myself all the time. So when you were playing tabletop role-playing games with your family and stuff, how did that go? Who ran the game? Were you running the game sometimes? Who was the game master that you learned from? Oh, awesome.
My dad always ran the games. He was my first gotcha DM too, because my dad's not super great with kids, even though he has 5 of them. And so he has no concept of making things kid friendly beyond the narrative stuff with all the math and things. So it's I'd be really small and watching all the Aliens movies or every horror friend, all of the John Carpenter movies, everything. And it would be there were lots of rocks fall, everyone dies moments, and there were lots of, oh, you found a genie's lamp, and then you're gonna rub it, you're gonna make a wish. And I remember he recanted this one story of us where we found a genie, gave us a wish, and my older sister was like, I wish all my enemies were gone. I wish they were dead. And so he moved her character 500 years into the future.
Wow. That is hardcore. Oh my gosh, your dad really was a brilliant DM. Holy.
He's a monster. He's a monster.
So you were playing with family and stuff, and then at some point you decided to make the jump to be a creative in the professional world, not just with Dungeons and Dragons, but also with your writing. How did that come about?
Whew, boy. So there were like a lot of weird years in the middle of that. When I was a kid, I always wanted to tell stories, but I didn't want to be a writer, if that makes sense. To say that I wanted to be a writer when I was a kid would be, I guess, wrong, because I didn't want to be a writer. I wanted to be an antagonist, if that makes sense. Whatever job I wanted as a kid was the job that the bad guys had. So, like, for a long time, after I watched Little Shop of Horrors, I wanted to be a dentist. It just, I don't know. There was something about the encounter between the hero and villain that I loved. I just loved it. I loved seeing the hero grow through conflict. And it wasn't until I was older that I realized I wanted to be a storyteller. I wanted to be an antagonist that created not only risk but reward for a hero, if that makes sense. But through like the middle of like my teenage years and college years and stuff, well, really through middle school, through high school, there was a resurgence of the satanic panic in rural Kentucky because of the vampire cult murders from Marie. And so they didn't know how to differentiate between Vampire Masquerade and Dungeons and Dragons. So they just smushed them together, and like everything similar to that was like evil.
Wow.
So it was hard to find a gaming group.
Yeah, I bet it would have been difficult to find people to play with, and I'm sure it may have affected to like the way the world sees you as an individual. I think can also shape your creative pursuits sometimes when you are setting forth. Did you find that was the case?
Yes, I also grew up in a part of Kentucky where being different racially was difficult, and then of course I'm non-binary, and so it's like there was no box I could fit into to fit into the world around me, and I tried. And when we moved up to northern Kentucky, I was like, I'm not going to. I worked a lot of like garbage dead end jobs, and when I moved up to northern Kentucky, I was like, I'm going to try and get a career that allows me to be an extrovert and is also like a viable career that I can make money at. And I went to cosmetology school, and I was a hairstylist and makeup artist for a couple of years. And I hated it. I mean, I liked helping people, but I hated the social aspect where you were trading everything you hate about high school cliques is like the fashion and hair industry and everything. So there's a lot of like secrets and like things like that being traded for social currency, and it's crappy, and I hate it.
Huh,
So,
wow, that is so weird.
yeah. Well, it's like, you know, this person's having an affair with this person, and then like there's just a lot of like backstabbing and stuff, and it's something I told myself that I'd never get into again. So I left last summer.
Good for you. Good for you. And you decided then to sort of pursue writing and Dungeons and Dragons. How did that all come about then?
Oh my gosh, that was on accident, actually. Not the writing, because the writing I had started getting into about mid 2016. I was trying to do a podcast around mid 2016, summer 2016. And this podcast was between me and my sister. And the long story short, the premise was two sisters on opposite sides of the country, and the story would all be told through missed voicemails. And so I wanted to write small snippets of horror-themed, just like flash fiction, and I put them on my Facebook, and then a lot of people liked them, and then I kept doing it for like 2 years, and I would do it every night.
Wow, I like that. Yeah. That's awesome. So how did that get you involved then with the Dungeons and Dragons community, the RPG community? How did those two come to be?
Like I said, that was an accident. So when I quit the job at the salon, I was like, I'm going to try and focus more on this writing. And so I realized I didn't have an audience, so I went to Twitter. And so I had made a Twitter previously for this podcast, which I stopped writing because I'm lazy. Um, and then I went back to this Twitter, and so like last June I started Twitter and started putting just like snippets of stories and stuff. And I met a lot of people in the community know her as Scarlet Moth. I met her through that because we have a similar interest in Planescape, and I saw her cosplays.
Nice, nice. That's awesome. So, and your interest in Planescape, did that come from, reading books with your family and playing D&D as a kid?
My dad didn't believe in console video games, but we all had computers because he was a network engineer after he left the military. So we would get his hand-me-down computers, and then we would get his hand-me-down PC games. And my favorite was Planescape Torment. That was my absolute favorite. I loved the art. I loved all the characters. Specifically, Daikon and Mort. Like, Mort was my favorite character, but I loved this thing about Daikon where he was like very much like a speak and be heard, like no duplicitous nature to him, which I liked.
That is great. It is a really, really fun video game. And I should mention that if people watching have questions for TK, you can drop them in the chat and I will make sure that they get asked. So go ahead, feel free to drop your questions right now in the chat for TK, and we'll get to them at some point. But I should mention, TK, that you are a player in many actual play games as well. How did you get involved, playing these actual play games, some of which, Hell's Bells is right there on the Dungeons and Dragons Twitch channel. So how did you get involved with that?
I kind of just tripped into them. So I met Moth, and she introduced me to Maz, and Maz asked me to play in a Christmas-themed one-shot, the Sleigh Bells Christmas-themed one-shot with Lisa Chen and Noelle Sheary, and Moth was in it. And then I played in a Valentine's Day one, and through Lisa Chen, I met the WebDM guys, and I would say that like of everybody that I've ever met, Lisa Chen she's probably responsible for all of the opportunities that I've had in actual plays, and that's not an exaggeration. Because like usually she had come in asking if anybody in our friend group had any interest in playing in a Thursday night game with WebDM, and I was not too embarrassed to remind her that I had started DMing in January, which meant that I had WebDM's playlists on my phone like 24/7. Like, dear God, I hope I don't screw this thing. I'll just see what Jim and Pruitt have to say about this issue. Yeah, so Lisa got me into the WebDM group, and then like I joined a similar like creatives friend group with Maz and Moth and Lisa and Kayla Klein, who has led to a lot of the writing opportunities that I've gotten. So like between Lisa and Kayla, I would not be anywhere like close to the success that I am, hands down.
Well, I think the same is true for all people, and Lisa Chen, one of the greatest humans out there, as well as yourself. So you, through that experience, you've met a bunch of other people. You've worked on Hell's Bells. You're working on the Strix comic now. So Strix is a character in Dice Camera Action, the Dungeons and Dragons actual play show that has taken the world by storm. What made you want to write this comic with Kayla, and what is it about?
Oh, okay. Look, I'm gonna answer. Let me pick out some little spots to answer because I'm not gonna. It's only 13 pages long. I can't spoil it. Suffice to say, I had written this flash fiction, and Kayla had. This is a project that Kayla and I had started. And it was going to be part of a charity event that we both had to step away from for our own health. Just too much stuff going on, and we couldn't dedicate the time we needed to this project. But it was a dice camera action themed project, and I had already written this flash fiction because I had been sort of, I don't know what kind of mood I was in at the time, but let's just say that I've always been fascinated with the theme of sisterhood that constantly goes through dice camera action. So Strix is not the only character in the comic. There is another character in the comic, but if I told you who it was beyond this extremely obvious clue, nobody would buy the comic. And but it was something I wanted to explore, like, how did she go from being incredibly distressed and hopeless during her time in Barovia to having the resolve to rescue her friends, and or spoiler alert, bring them back to life. So how did she make that switch? And this is, I consider it a non-canon comic, though Holly has read the script and she likes it. She approves of it, as Kayla has told me, which Kayla could just be like, hey, tell me anything because I'm not gonna know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I know you are such a Strix fan and you play with Holly on Hell's Bells, but I am wondering, because today I learned from a tweet you sent out that you are not actually a fan of playing tieflings yourself. Is that right?
That's 100% true. I don't like playing, and so, like, you had an interview with Hadil a couple weeks ago, and Hadil essentially said all of the things that I have said in the past. Like, we agree 100%, Hadil and I, on tieflings and the way that they are typically portrayed by people, in that there is this unfortunate, like, fascination with being ostracized or demonized, haha, for the way you look or for your race or something like that. And some people like living out that fantasy, and some people who grew up as a brown kid in rural Kentucky don't. Like, it's just, and I don't think that tieflings bring so much to the table to that they would, like, I would be like, oh man, like, this totally makes up for the fact that, like, every town I go into, people are gonna, like, look at me funny and talk about me behind my back and stuff. Like, I could go outside and do that.
But what I do know, because spoiler alert, I am your DM in our weekly Demon Plague game on the Don't Split the Podcast Network channel. I do know that you have said that you like to play like half orcs and sort of the quote unquote monstrous species in D&D. Do you see them as different from halflings in that way, or as different from tieflings? I'm sorry. In that way?
Yes, because the main difference I see for half-orcs and some of the other monstrous races, tieflings are too close. Tieflings are too close to the diaspora for me, because tieflings do not have a shared heritage like a lot of mixed race people or diasporic people living in America. And so that's, like, too close for me. Whereas, like, half-orcs can kind of, like, they can be raised by a parent and things like that. Like, there is, with half-orcs and a savvy DM and things like that, there's not an immediate implication of evil by their very presence, whereas tieflings are very different, and the way that people tend to play tieflings or run tieflings, it's I feel the same way about drow though too. Usually when somebody's like, "Oh, I play drow," I'm just like, "Yeah, okay." A lot of times you don't get that one of the good one tropes with half orcs.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's very true, and I think we see half orcs have become one of the core races that you see in the handbooks. I suppose tieflings have as well now. But I think you're right. When you read the half orc description, it's kind of like half orcs, get along with everybody, but tieflings still read, even in their description in core rules, as outcasts and that sort of thing. So yeah, you're totally right. This is really great. You're blowing my mind with this stuff too.
I mean, thank you, but like that doesn't just have to. And of course, like not all people of color are going to feel the same way, like about those things, obviously. But that's just been my experience growing up in rural Kentucky, and probably Hadil's experience growing up in Florida. So,
sure, yeah, absolutely. And I do want to ask you about spooky stories. So, why spooky? What is it about things that are spooky or scary that draws you to tell stories like that?
Honestly, before 2016, I hadn't considered writing anything horror based. I wanted to do epic fantasy. What I like about horror, and especially horror that is like more creature features, or the type of stuff that I usually like is The Thing or Alien, stuff like that. I like that they make us examine our humanity. And how far that we're willing to go to prove that we deserve to exist. And I think that horror stories encapsulate that more than maybe fantasy or sci-fi tends to. Except maybe like stuff like Battlestar Galactica or more cyberpunk things. But there's usually a sentient other that you struggle against in like Battlestar Galactica or geez, I cannot think of the name of it. Andrew's Dream of Electric Sheep. What's the movie? I need the movie.
Oh, Electric Sheep in a movie.
Yeah, Tears in the Rain. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Why can I not even think of the name of the movie? It's one of my favorites. It's got Decker in it. What's this movie?
Is it Blade Runner?
Blade Runner. Thank you.
Yes.
Or like I would even put like Akira like in that weird middle ground, because it's like why do I deserve to exist more than this alien? And a lot of it is pure instinct. So I like that about the paranormal and about horror as well, because it's not sentient. So it's like it's more of a man against nature, but it's a nature that he can't explain. So I do like that. Like why do I deserve to still be here and this ghost has to move,
Right. Yeah. I think that is great. And those are strong questions that you can see at the center of horror and a lot of genre stories. I'm wondering what you think, because I had a conversation with somebody a few months ago that changed the way I saw droids in Star Wars. What do you think about droids in Star Wars?
Oh boy. Okay. So I'm going to be the wet blanket in the room and say that I don't love sassy droids. Like I like the one sassy droid, but when you get like where it's like an anomaly, but when you start like every franchise has to have a sassy droid, they're like this Disney sidekick character that it's like, okay, I get it. Every Disney movie's got to have a sassy horse, like it's just like who's programming this droid? I'm okay with droids for the most part. um,
Mhm.
when they're window dressing, but when droids are the hero of the story and they don't really get top billing on the poster, it's like, okay, like I don't think it's necessary for R2D2 to be in every movie and to save like so many storylines and like come in clutch and things like that. Like it's like almost the definition of a Deus Ex Machina at one point. It's like, come on, man. Like if Wizard can't do it, don't throw in his little Roomba to come and save him. But other than that, it's cool. It's whatever.
I'm wondering if you have a piece of writing that you've done that you think is like something that's really good that exemplifies your work that you're really proud of that you'd like people to go read.
I do actually. I do have a piece on my website. It is called A Light. And it was a time where I was like, yeah, I could probably do dark fantasy. And the premise of it is that the person who is narrating the story, because I write almost all of my stories from second person point of view, that person is an adventurer looking for something in a ruined tower. And spoiler alert for people who haven't, so take it's called A Light. Sorry, Lisa, even though you've read it. So um the spoiler alert for people who haven't read the story, so mute it for 10 seconds and come back. There's a scene where you meet these human candles that have been lit up, and like you can smell, like I use a lot of sensory manipulation in my stories, so you can smell like the flesh and the tallow and that, and it's one of my favorite things. And when the fuse on these human candles is lit, there's like a screaming that sort of just acts through the tower, and it's one of my favorite pieces. It was based on a dream I had.
Oh my gosh, that is spooky, 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 and very, very cool. Do you bring a lot of the things that you like to tell in your writing? Do you bring that into your D&D games when you run RPGs?
Yes, but I can't do it in the future. Like if I do any streamed games in the future, I can't do it because if anybody's read my stuff, they will immediately pick it out and be like, I see what you've done. But yeah, they're at home. Definitely, I have. I brought scenes from a couple of the that I know that friends haven't read, and I'll put them in like the reoccurring scene that is a shared dream among the party in my home game of a tree that is sort of there are red flakes of snow and they settle on this tree's leaves and they melt there and they become like red rain. And to get to this enormous hangs a field of bleat, and this field of black, as you're like moving through it, you look down and you see that there are all these elves on the ground, and it's actually their blackened arms that are like waving in the wind. And then as you get closer, you see these statues made of ash they have closed eyes and their mouths are like gaping open towards the sky as the red snow is melting and like dripping into their mouths and running down the sides of their mouths. And it's a prophecy dream that I'm not going to tell you in case one of my party members is watching this, but it's fun. That was based on a dream I had too.
Wow. I feel like I need to up the horror now in Demon Plague.
No,
that is
and then
so.
Everyone had ice cream.
That is so evocative and incredible, and terrifying. Thank you so much for sharing that. So I have a question here from a viewer. They want to know, what's one of the best bits of advice you would give to someone interested in being a writer for tabletop games and in the community and getting noticed?
Getting noticed in, actually, I'm not going to ask you because that question Sorry, boom up through chat and you can't answer. Okay, for somebody who wants to write and get into for tabletop games and things like that, number one, Twitter. Twitter. Make a writing website. A lot of people like Squarespace. I personally use Wix right now. It's okay. Lots of hidden fees though, so keep that in mind when making a website. Like check out those hidden fees. When it comes to when you're writing an adventure, assuming that you are a person who wants to write narrative and mechanics, go ahead, go onto the DMs Guild groups that are on Facebook. I know we've kind of outgrown Facebook by now, but try it anyway and see who is hiring or not hiring, but like has done a call out for items for anthologies and stuff so that you can learn the mechanics. Offer to edit one of those anthologies so that you can look for items and stuff. If you're a person who likes to write narratives, see who's putting out a call for narratives. Absolutely answer the calls that you think that you can handle. And if it's something that's outside of your genre where you're like, oh, I've never done this before, give it a shot anyway if you have time. Absolutely budget your time correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. Go on to the Dungeon Masters Guild fan club and the Dungeon Masters Guild creator circle. And now there's Dungeon Masters Guild groups and things because Lisa Chen is the new community manager and amazing. And there are plenty of places to get involved that way.
Lisa Chen coming in clutch.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let me go back to the Strix comic for a second. Kayla Klein. What made you want to work with Kayla specifically? Why do you think that partnership works really well? And I certainly think it does. But I'm just wondering about your take on it.
First of all, like, even though I only met her in probably January, Kayla Klein is one of my 3 best friends. Like, in this entire community. Yeah, she's one of my 3 best friends. The other 2 being Lisa Chen and Hadil. Yeah, shout out to my wives. But Kayla wasn't my best friend at the time. I just really, really loved her style. I love the way that she talks about art. She's never afraid to try new things. And we have a lot of very similar interests. We have a lot of similar aesthetics, but her art style, 100%. I don't know if you've ever read The Edge Chronicles with Chris Riddle.
No, I have not.
It's an English. I think I'm breaking up a little. One sec. There we go. Okay, it's an English sort of a steampunk fantasy series. It's kind of darker. The art is kind of like that, where characters don't all have the same face, and they're a little awkward, a little gangly. The fingers are very similar, like very angular looks to them. And it was one of my favorite fantasy series when I was in college, and that was something that I absolutely loved. And after this comic, we're actually going to be working on a collection of the short stories that I've written that will be illustrated. So.
Yes, I love that. That's such good news to hear. And then,
yeah. Oh, sorry, that's my garage. My husband is home from work.
So you mentioned that you have done some work on collaborative projects for the DMs Guild. Are you able to talk about those at all?
Nope, not yet.
Excellent. Well, then let's keep it broad strokes and just say, obviously, you found some people to work with. How have you found being part of the DMs Guild community so far?
Honestly, like, I come from SCA and things like that, where people don't typically communicate with each other well whenever we're working on projects together. It's like, yeah, I want to work on this thing, and then you won't hear anything from someone for like 6 months, and they'll have like secretly worked on their side of the project, and you're like, oh, I never got measurements. Okay. The DMs Guild is a lot better at communicating with things like that, at least the people that I worked through on this project. I had signed up to this project with Emmett Byrne, I believe is his name, or I hope that's how it's pronounced. I don't know because he's Irish, and I'm like, oh, I hope I don't screw this up. It looks easy, but so does all Irish. And I believe Pengelly ended up over the project. So anybody who's in the know on like demons or DM's Guild stuff will automatically know this project. But I don't know how much I'm allowed to talk about it. But it does have to do with artifacts.
Oh, yes. Yes, it does. I have something to do with that project as well. So that is going to be a big, bold release when it comes out. So I'm very excited. It's a lot of fun. So when you think about sort of your creative career writing within the world of role-playing games, outside the world of role-playing games, what do you think you are most proud of?
Sorry, my husband's closing the garage door again.
It's okay.
Yeah. Oh, whoopsies. Thought he wasn't getting 5. What would I say I'm most proud of? Oh my gosh. I'm probably I know I hadn't mentioned this when you asked what I do in the community, but like I recently got reached out to by Dan, who runs tabletoptest.com, and so right now I'm writing a lot of storytelling tips and stuff for newer and less experienced GMs. And I think that's probably what I'm the most proud of, is that like somebody who went on my writer's website and like came to me and was like, hey, I have this job if you're interested. Would you like to do this? And I was like, yeah, I'm going to do it. And I've made all my deadlines, so.
That's great. So why is it important to you to help new GMs learn how to be narrative storytellers?
Because I screwed up a whole lot whenever I was a new GM. There's some things that they don't tell you about in YouTube videos. And I think that like we're still, especially for people who grew up, like I told you, I grew up with a very like brutal gotcha DM dad, and I was okay with that. Like I could handle it, but I think that there were a lot of things that he could have done better that would have instilled a longer lived love of the game in me. Because in middle school, when people were like, yeah, well, if you play this, you're a devil worshiper, and also we'll never invite you to any sleepovers and blah, 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 which is what happened. And we'll also beat you up. I was kind of like, well, I guess I better give this up because it's kind of just Dungeons and Dragons. So, okay. But I don't know. Maybe I would have tried harder if I'd loved it more at the time. There is this really strange obsession with gotcha DMism that I think newer people coming to the game don't appreciate as much as we did when we had no other choice. And all of scenarios that I use in my articles that I talk about are scenarios that I've done myself, that I've like screwed up and caused some form of resentment in my home game. And one that I am not proud of, but definitely sticks out the most as like my biggest mistake, was my younger sister. It's her first game ever, and so she's a ranger, and she created a group of 6 other rangers that would follow her ranger character around. And I decided, like, I can't let her have 6 NPC wandering around and then she joins the rest of the party. But I didn't talk to her about like the mechanics and like why I'm not gonna really let her do it. So I did instead something that's like a really bad tendency in gotcha DMism, and it's like the cruel twist, you know, where I basically, there's a corruption that is infecting the world and everything, and I infected several of her scouts, and she had to mercy kill them.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, you could see why, like, in the third, like, it was enough that she almost had her character commit suicide in game, and she, like, really withdrew through the rest of the game. And when we talked about it, like, you know, I apologized and everything, and I did give her some closure later, and like, she got, like, a Sylvan Stag out of it and everything, where she got to have, like, a magical mount and stuff. But, like, the fact that she almost killed her character off and gave up Dungeons and Dragons because I was too lazy as a game master to communicate with her about something that would make my job easier. Like, I could have just as easily talked to her during a break, and then she's like, okay, I'm going to send my scouts ahead or something. Then she doesn't have the scouts anymore. Like, anything could have happened to them, and her, like, psyche is intact, which I guess is probably an exaggeration. But, like, the fact that, like, what she gleaned from it was that I was punishing her.
Mm-hmm.
And that I didn't trust her enough to be mature to handle that. And so it was, like, kind of, you know, it was a strain, and it made resentment. If she hadn't been my sister, then maybe she would have, like, if I'm running it at a club, maybe they never play Dungeons and Dragons anymore. Because it's like, when they try to affect the world around them, we punish them for their investment. Why?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a difference between punishment and placing an obstacle in the path of the players that they fail to overcome, and they are therefore suffer hard times, right? That's what makes you a gotcha DM. You're not saying never, right? You know.
No. Well, yeah. In this case, I didn't give them any. She had no way to. There were no mechanics in place for her to stop them from getting it. Like, she fell asleep, and like, I made her character fall asleep. I said that she was exhausted, and so she fell asleep. Like, I just made her fail. Like, she failed a Constitution check. So it's like, why? That's not even a requirement. And then she just woke up, and they were infected from drinking from the river. Like, they didn't get Constitution checks or anything. I just killed them. You know, I just killed them for no reason. And that's, like, really crap. That's punishing. Now, if it's like a trap or something where I've got, like, a bunch of skulls on the ground or something, and they're like, we're going to touch it anyway, you know, that's different. That's, I mean, you did it to yourself. But there's a difference between instilling tragedy and punishing a character for no reason. Like, that was a punishment for no reason.
And the reason I bring that up is because you and I have spoken before, and you have described your DM style. And I think, correct me if I am wrong, but you're a DM who, it seems like, also doesn't pull any punches. Not in a gotcha way, but in a, like, oh, you're going down that tunnel that's filled with blood. All right, and letting the chips fall where they may.
I will say that Jim Davis has inspired my DM style a lot, and especially he convinced me to get rid of the "Are you sure?" Like, if you put a monster there, like, you need to follow through. You can't just, because first of all, the party's going to be like, yeah, I'm sure. And then they're going to be mad at you. It's like, well, you know, just put the warnings in the atmosphere. But yeah, like, I'll usually tell people ahead of the game, especially if there's been a huge tone change or something, where it's like, okay, well, we just rescued a miller and their family, or we went to a festival and we like grew flowers in a field or something. At the beginning of the next session, I'll be like, okay, you know, we're going back to the regular tone, or, you know, I'm just letting you guys know, like, in this area there are some serious dangers, and I'm going to do everything I can to kill you.
There you go. That's not a gotcha. You're telling them right up front what's going on.
And they know, like, going in and stuff. We do a lot of, like, pre-session talk, and then I try to do a little bit of aftercare after the session nowadays, especially, just to be like, hey, how'd you feel about that? Is there anything you would have wanted changed? Like, what? And if they're just like, man, I wish we could have had more loot, I'm like, I don't care. You're in the forest where you spend it, like, whatever.
Sure. How do you suggest people do aftercare in their games?
I think it depends on the group. We all live really close by, so some of us are they can spend a little time after the game talking about it. There are two players in particular where they they leave very late after the game, and so we sit there and talk, and I'll sit one-on-one with them and like, hey, you know, how'd you feel about it, and if they say, yeah, I had a great time, I kind of have to take them at their word, like, because it's like, if they're smiling and they said they had a great time, it's like, you guys are here with me now, like, if you have an issue, like, please let me know. Now, there are also people who don't like to talk in front of other people, especially if they had a problem. If you find that you have somebody who is very withdrawn after the game and is running very quickly, like leaving quickly and things like that, there might be something going on. Maybe reach out to them through text and be like, hey, you know, how'd you like that game? What happened that you really liked, and what was the thing that you really didn't like? They might not like talking about their feelings in front of other people. Talking about their characters' feelings is one thing, but talking about like their personal feelings, like as a player, maybe they don't want to look silly because they're too tied to a character or something like that, you know. That might be a thing that needs to happen. Some people, I have a guy who plays Pathfinder regularly, and so they're not used to aftercare. So I go through my sister to do aftercare for him because they're dating. So I'm just like, hey, why don't you talk to him about, like, you know, things like that, and tell him if he has anything he wants to bring up at the next session that we can. And then I meet him pre-session and I'm like, hey, you know, is there anything that you want to, you know, talk about and things like that. And that's usually, he's a little socially awkward. So sorry, Charlie, I'm sorry that I called you out on the internet.
Yeah, mostly for being a Pathfinder player, Charlie.
No, he's a really good role player. Like, I thought that I was gonna have to, like, pair him up with my sister the whole time for, like, role play stuff, and that he'd just, like, want the dice in his hands, like, all the time. But no, he's great. He's a great role player. Like, he really pushes stuff, and he really, like, explores surroundings and tries new things. They were having like a Ocean's 11 style car chase or whatever. Maybe not Ocean's 11. I don't think they ever do a car chase, but like they were doing like a heisty kind of carriage chase over the plains, and he like looks at me on his turn and he's like, hey, I have a question for you, tell me if it's stupid. And I was like, yeah, go for it. Like, I like put the DM screen down. I'm like and he's like, how big are ball bearings? And I was like, let's say that they're about the size of a caltrip. And he was like, I have 1,000 ball bearings, can I just throw them on the ground? And like and I made him like roll for it and everything. And like these knight's horses are like ass over tea kettle, like tumbling down the hill. I loved it. I was like, yes, inspiration, please. Yeah, I loved it.
That is so fun. And of course, I love Pathfinder players, and I will play any game that has a dungeon and a dragon in it, including Pathfinder. So just a joke for all the Charlies out there in the world listening. So as we're wrapping up here, TK, I'm wondering, what are your hopes for the future of the tabletop role-playing game industry, you know, either personally or for the industry as a whole?
Okay. This is a thing that, like, it can be a double-edged sword a lot of the times. I would like to see more non-European settings, but I would like to see more non-European settings that are written by people of color, first of all, but also that star those natives and those indigenous people as the heroes. I'm getting a little weary of like these, like, your adventure into this area and your adventurers save this area and all of these primitive people, and your adventurers march out and nothing changes. There's just nothing happens. Like, is the adventure might as well have not happened, because like in Ravenloft especially, I like get this issue, but Chult 2, like, why I'd like to see the Chultans as heroes. I'd like to see Karatur people as heroes. You know, I'd like to see Kalimshan people as heroes. And I understand if people aren't interested in that, but sometimes it's just nice to know that you can save yourself,
Mm-hmm.
not have to worry about other people coming in. And also more Ravenloft stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes perfect sense, and that's a really cool and good perspective. And I do think as hopefully the industry continues to become more diverse and see more diverse players and creators coming in, right? That it's not just all people who look like me getting in and making stuff. That we're gonna see really cool and interesting products, including, you know, stories where people save themselves. I've seen complaints about Ravenloft and about Tomb of Annihilation, but I've never seen it put in that perspective of like, I'd like to see these people saving themselves, which I think is really awesome and a really cool story. So, and then what advice do you have for people who want to do what you want to do?
Do it. That's like literally the only, like, the difference between me and this screen and you who is not in this screen is that I quit my job and didn't have another job lined up and was like, yes, this is what I'm doing. And then I just like took it one step at a time.
Nice.
But my real advice for this is don't become so focused. If you do not, don't become so focused on making it that you completely change who you are, like, as a person, and that you hurt other people to get there. Like, always be mindful of the person that you are and the person that you want to become, because success isn't defined by, like, going to, like, I don't go to conventions and get people to sign stuff. I don't go to conventions and like hold panels or anything like that. I'm not D&D fan, but I am what I would consider to be successful. And they don't have to be mutually exclusive. And whoever you want to be, like, as a person, if you're sitting there looking at it and being like, man, my dream more than anything else is to, you know, meet this person or playing this game with this person or blah, blah, blah. You have to be willing to push those dreams farther, and you have to look yourself and be like, what am I going to do to make this a thing, because if you're just hoping and praying for it, I don't know what to tell you, man. Like, it's probably not going to happen. It could be happy that way. You could absolutely be happy that way. But if you're not happy that way, if you're not happy not being influencing the industry, then you need to ask yourself some serious questions about what you're willing to do that.
I think that is some great advice, including in that banner, right? Do the things that make you happy too, which is really important and what it's all about. So TK, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. Where can people find you on the internet?
You can pretty much find me Twitter. I'm like always on Twitter. Don't bother looking on Facebook. Don't bother looking on Tumblr. I have things on Facebook and Tumblr, but I never update them.
Oh,
they're like, I only update Twitter. On Instagram, if you want to see way too many pictures of my cat, 100%. Check out my Instagram. It'll be TK has joined the fray, because they let me have more characters over there. On Twitter, TK joins the fray. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Anything that you need to see for, like, upcoming stuff, it's all going to be on Twitter. If you like reading spooky stories and you don't like paying for spooky stories, tkjwrites.com. There you go. Did you a favor.
Well, thank you so much for that and for everything that you do for this community, TK. You are amazing, and I will see you on Tuesday for our Demon Plague game.
Oh my god, we gotta find a gelatinous cube.
That's right. That's right. Where things were
sorry,
left.
spoiler.
No worries. No worries. Yeah, it'll be the last session when you all die because of a gelatinous cube.
Oh no. As long as Dusk is okay.
And I want to let people know, join us next week. Nadja Odekor is going to be my guest, and I'm very, very excited about that. And this now exists as a podcast. If you want to catch up on episodes, they're on the Encounter Roleplay YouTube channel, or you can head on over to iTunes or Google Play or Stitcher or whatever your podcatcher app of choice is, and search for Tabletop Voices, and you'll be able to listen to the show. Thank you all so much for listening, and be very, very good to each other. Goodbye. Woo. All right.
We did it.
We did.
It turns out that the